Hi guys, in this video we're going to talk about epidemiology. We're going to first define what epidemiology is, then look at some of the different types of studies that we can do and the methods of conducting those studies, and then talk a bit about the difference between correlation and causation. So firstly, epidemiology is the study of patterns of disease in populations, as well as looking at the causes of disease and really trying to get more and more evidence to relate the cause to that particular disease. It can be used for both infectious and non-infectious disease, and in the non-infectious disease we're particularly talking about the environmental and lifestyle diseases. And this is when I said in providing evidence for causation, this is where that sort of stuff happens. Now the focus here is on population, so you want to actually have a look at how many people have the disease within the population, how many people are exposed to the causative factor within the population. You're not looking at individuals. Looking at individuals is more like pathology, which we've talked about before, looking at the causes and effects of the disease itself. This is looking at a bigger picture and worldview. Now there's a couple of different types of epidemiological studies. The first one is a descriptive study, and that is like the map that I showed you in the previous slide, showing the distribution of a disease around the world. We then have analytical studies. Analytical studies test a hypothesis and provide evidence that a particular factor could be a causative factor. We can then look at intervention studies, which look at an intervention, so whether it's cleaning up of drinking water or introducing a new drug to a population, as to how effective that intervention is, and hopefully looking at the decrease in incidence of the disease. There's two main ways that we can conduct these different types of studies. The first one is a cohort study, and the idea of a cohort study is it's looking forward. So you get two groups with members in the study, and then you follow them over time to see if they develop the disease. So for example, you might have one group that are non-smokers and one group that are smokers, and then over a period of time you follow them and see if they, for example, develop lung cancer. Now, the drawback to this is that it takes a long time to do, as well as it's quite labour intensive, because you have people drop out of the study, as well as then chasing these people up so that you can see how they're going. It's quite resource intensive, but it is a very robust type of study. On the other side, we can use a case control study. They're not quite as robust, but the good thing about them is that rather than following a group over time, you actually look back into the group's medical history, and so you can get a snapshot of that period of time. The downside to this is medical histories can be a bit patchy, especially if you're using surveys to ask people about their medical history. They could have forgotten important components there. But the idea here, for example, is you could look at two groups, one that has lung cancer and one that does not have lung cancer, and then get them to complete a survey on their history of smoking. Not as labour intensive, not as robust. I'm going to finish off this video talking a bit about the difference between correlation and causation. So correlation is when two variables are found at the same time, and you can run statistical analysis into these to prove or to show a trend in that correlation. But it doesn't necessarily show that one variable causes the other variable, and that's where causation comes into it. You can actually pull a fair few cool graphs off the internet. This is one that I pulled off looking at rock music quality versus US oil production. Now you can see that they both peaked in sort of the late 60s, early 70s. So there is a correlation here. Whether the crude oil production actually caused good rock songs to be produced, probably not. Similarly, if you look here, you can see that there is a definite trend between the amount of chocolate consumption and the Nobel laureates per population. And you can see that the more chocolate that's eaten by a country, the more Nobel laureates it produces. Again, cool little correlation, but not causation. Causation's much harder to actually pin down. In fact, it's almost impossible to 100% categorically prove causation. And this is a fact that a lot of companies, in general, particularly evil ones, use to their advantage to imply that because something has not been 100% proved to cause something, that it doesn't. What we can do with our studies is provide evidence, and generally beyond reasonable doubt, that one thing causes another. But we have a few indicators of causation. And what I'm going to do is talk about our fruit fly and our fruit fly mutations being caused by X-ray radiation. So the first thing is a high relative risk. So that means that if you look at fruit fly that are exposed to radiation, they then have a high risk of developing mutations, and more high than the standard population. We also have consistency, that the exposure to radiation consistently produces mutations. An interesting one here is a graded response to a graded dose. And what that means is that the more exposure you have to the dose, so for example the radiation, the more likely it's going to be that a mutation is going to occur. So what you could do here is expose the fruit fly to different levels of radiation, and you should see that as you increase the level of radiation, the level of mutations also increases. You also need a temporal relationship, and this is to do with time. So, for example, or in our example, the mutations need to occur after the exposure to the X-rays. So if it was the other way around, that implies that there isn't causation there. And finally, you need a plausible mechanism. So you need to actually work out why that X-ray exposure is going to cause those mutations. As I said, these are indicators. They give us more and more evidence that causation is taking place, hopefully beyond reasonable doubt, but is very hard to prove categorically. In this video, we've talked about epidemiology, being the study of diseases across populations. We've talked about the different types of studies, being descriptive, analytical, or intervention studies. We've talked about the two different methods of studies, either being a cohort study, which gets a group and looks forward over time, or a case control study, where you get the groups and look backwards in time using a history. And we've talked about the difference between correlation and it not necessarily implying causation, and some factors that can give us information of causation. Thanks for watching, guys. Peace out.